So we start out with most respected guest speaker for the day, Dr. Ruth M. Crabtree, Professor Claudia, Dr. G. Kishore, Dr. Sanjeev Patil, all my dear teachers. A warm welcome to one and all to the PE and Community Coaching Program exclusively for women. We are honored to have with us Professor Ruth, who's worked in higher education for over 25 years teaching in the area of sport management and currently works at the University of Northumbria in Newcastle, England, teaching at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels in the areas of strategic management, sport marketing, organizational theory, and resource management. Ma'am held senior positions within the higher education, including head of the Department of Sport, Exercise and Rehabilitation, and head of international development, which involved developing international links and agreements with other institutes of higher education and overseas organizations. With an international reputation as a sport management educator, Ruth has developed partnerships with many institutes across the globe, including Europe, Asia, North America, Africa. Ma'am has also been responsible for developing and acting as consultant for many international programs and has sat on numerous validation panels both in UK and abroad. Ma'am is involved with many external sport organizations and held the following prestigious posts: Vice President of the European Association of Sport Management, Advisor to the African Sport Business Association, and is currently Vice President of the World Association of Sport Management. Ma'am's main emphasis in these roles is a focus on learning and teaching within sport management, and Ma'am has been instrumental in developing innovative programs and solutions to ensuring that students are equipped with the necessary skills needed in an ever-changing, dynamic sport industry. Ma'am is often asked to attend and contribute to management think tanks, including the Doha Goals Forum, which is university-recognized authority for world leaders to create initiatives for global progress through sport, as well as the 5th World Parks Congress in South Africa, which was exclusively by nomination invitation to the patronage of Nelson Mandela. Ma'am is frequently asked to comment on sport management education for the media, sit on scientific committees, undertook book reviews for many publishers, and receives frequent invitations from numerous esteemed institutes globally to deliver lectures, symposium, and workshops. Recently, Madam received a prestigious Distinguished Service Award from the European Association of Sport Management. This prize has been awarded only to one other individual. The statement of the award include that it was in recognition for significant involvement and outstanding service for commitment, leadership style, as well as a collegiality and loyalty of the highest standards. As an established teacher and subject specialist, Ma'am is a committed and an enthusiastic member of staff who has the welfare of both the student and the staff at heart. In all the work she undertakes, students' learning and teaching are at the forefront of her mind, which has been recognized by colleagues from across the globe who now ask her to help, comment, or become involved with aspects of learning and teaching within sport management. Ma'am has undertaken research within sport tourism and in particular countryside management, which has enabled her to travel to many different countries, where she has spent time examining different perspectives on how to manage national parks and tourists. Her current research involves sport management, education, and with that in mind, she now present findings from a recent research she's undertaken investigating student engagement within higher education from both the staff and students' perspective.
Thank you, Dr.
Usher. We are indeed honored and blessed to have such an eminent personality, and you are a powerhouse of energy, which I could feel. Even though you're the screen, we could feel it. And we are honored and blessed. We have nearly 5,300 teachers who are here. And I'm sure each one of us is going to be energized and charged. So we have put ourselves into charging mode right now because, we are going to get charged. On behalf of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Ministry of Women and Child Development, Lakshmibai National College of Physical Education, a warm welcome to our dignified speaker, Madam Ruth Crabtree. Ma'am, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Dr. Usher, for those very, very kind words. And I'm absolutely delighted to be able to spend the next hour, 2 hours with you and all the people on the call today. I'd like to first and foremost thank you to Dr. Usher, Pranesh, and the people behind the scenes that make this possible. It's a great, fantastic initiative. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. To the distinguished guests, to Claudia, to the principal of the to the Sports Association of India, to the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, and most importantly, to all the 5.4 thousand participants on the call today. You are the most important people here today. So thank you very much for the invite, and I look forward to talking to you. When I present, I very much like interaction from anybody. So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and Claudia and Dr. Usher will help us monitor the chat, and we'll try and answer those questions as we go along. So can I have the first slide up?
Just a minute, please. I also like to welcome Madam Professor Claudia from Mexico. Ma'am, a warm welcome to you. I'd like to welcome Dr. G. Kishore, who is a principal. I welcome all my dear teachers. I call them as girls because all my girls who are bubbling with energy. A warm welcome to each one of you. Over to you, ma'am, for the session, please.
Okay, thank you. Pranesh, can we have the first slide, please?
Sure.
So today I'm going to talk about student engagement, advantages and barriers to success. But before I start talking about the theory and the research and some of the findings, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself. Dr. Usher has mentioned a little bit about me, but a little bit about me more personally. So the next slide, please, Pranesh. So a little bit about me. These are some photographs of me. I love sport. I love watching sport. I love participating in sport. I've played many different sports across the years. When I was younger, I used to play football. I used to play for my local team, Middlesbrough Football Club in the north of England. I used to play for my university and my colleges. But now I'm too old to play football now anymore. So I love getting out in the outdoors and going out hiking. I've worked in higher education. I've worked in university for over 25 years. And as Dr. Usher said, I've had different roles whilst I've been at university. My latest role was that of international development. So I work with many different universities and institutions around the world and travel to many universities and many sports institutions to work in partnership. I've traveled to India many times. I've worked with the Sports Authority of India. We've had many students from India come and study in my programs in my university. And at the moment, I'm working with a student on the dissertation, and she's an Indian student looking from Pune, looking at martial arts in India and what stops females from participating in martial arts in India in particular. So it's really interesting, bearing in mind all the people on the call today are female PE teachers. It's a really interesting study to be looking at. As Dr. Usher mentioned, I've held voluntary positions for different sports boards around the world. I've worked for the European Association for Sports Management, and I'm working currently as the Vice President of the World Association of Sport Management. What I love about those positions is working with people from different countries and learning about different cultures and learning about different ways to look at things and learning about different values and learning that everybody's got some part to play in how we develop and enhance sport or enhance teaching. So I love working in those voluntary boards because I learn from other people. But my biggest passion is teaching and working with students. And I love to teach international students because they teach me, they bring something different, something new to the classroom. And I think teaching is an art, I think it's a craft, and I think it's a skill. And I know all the people on the call today are PE teachers or PE coaches, and I know what an exceptional, important role you play in helping deliver and advance not only the sport, not only teaching, but most importantly, all the students that you work with. So you're doing a marvelous job. So keep up the great work. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is student engagement. And what do we mean about student engagement? Why is it important? And why, as PE teachers or PE coaches, we should have an understanding about engagement and what the benefits are, but the barriers might be to engaging as well. So just before I click on the next slide, who can put in the chat what we think we mean by engagement? What is student engagement to you? What are some of the key words you might use to explain student engagement? I'll just give you 30 seconds to type in the chat what we think engagement is.
All the teachers kindly put that in the chat box. What do you mean by engagement? In which way you feel that this is an engagement being done? So please enter into the chat box. That's good.
So somebody's
involvement by making busy, time spending with the right away, mass participation, productive, Kiran Pawar to be involved, Kavita participation, Piyusha busy, allowing students effectively participation by involvement, meeting, engagement, committed, making, I think it's skipping too fast, busy.
I've got to know.
Lots of, thank you so much, my dear teachers. You're so actively doing positive learning, spending time.
I've got a good overview there, Usha, Dr. Usha. I've got a good overview now of what the participants are saying. Thank you for sharing that with you. You're quite right. If we can just jump onto the next slide, Pranesh, please. For all those people that have answered, it's great what you're saying. When we think about student engagement, if we can just click on the next, thanks, Pranesh. If we think about student engagement, then there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of research going on at the moment. Sorry, the previous one, Pranesh. That's it, yeah. If we think about student engagement, there's lots of people, lots of researchers have different views about what do we mean by engagement. As you've rightly said in the chat, it's about being involved, it's about organising, it's about participation, it's about making people busy, about getting our students busy and organised and getting involved, etc. And if we look at what the researchers are saying, they're saying that people have very, very different views about how we actually define student engagement. But the most simplest and easy way of defining it is if you look at that second bullet point, student engagement has been described as, well, what students do or what is their involvement and commitment whilst in education. So it's not just about academic engagement, about them participating in a class, answering questions, etc., but it also might be about additional activities that they might participate in when they're at school, college, university. Do they get involved in societies? Do they get involved in sports teams? Do they get involved in being representatives, etc., student reps? So when we think about this presentation today, we're looking at student engagement as what students do, what their involvement is, and commitment whilst in education from an academic point of view, but also a non-academic point of view as well. And if you look at just the third bullet point, the dimensions of student engagement, then some people have come up that engagement is about different parts, different dimensions. So if we think about behavioural engagement, how do your students participate in class? Are some of them quiet? Are some of them putting their hand up? Are some of them volunteering? They want to get involved? Are some of them answering the questions all the time? That would be behavioural engagement. If we think about cognitive engagement, how do they demonstrate critical thinking ability? So if you give them a problem that they have to work on, how do they think about it and how do they go about solving that? That would be cognitive engagement. Or it could be effective engagement. How do you take a student from whatever age and you're working with them, it might be a few years, it might be a few months, and how do you get them to reach their full potential? So how do they develop themselves and make the best of what they can do? So that would be effective engagement. And then another dimension is this social behavioural engagement. So how do students get together in teams? How do they work in groups? How do they socialise and how do they behave in those different types of groups or teams? So those are some different aspects about how researchers are describing student engagement. Next slide, please, Pranesh. Does any of this need translating, Dr. Usha, or is it okay?
Okay, I'll let you know. I'll let you know about it.
Thanks. So if we look at a recent model then about student engagement and we look at it a little bit more in depth, this is a model from the Higher Education Academy in the UK, and they're suggesting that really student engagement is about working in partnership. It's not the teacher, it's not the lecturer, it's not the coach saying, do it this way, this is the only way to do it because I'm the most expertise here and do. They're suggesting that's not a good approach to engagement. Engagement is about a partnership. So how do we, this concept of co-creation that's very written about, it's researched a lot at the moment, this idea of how do students add value to the classroom setting, to the school setting, to the university setting. How do we work with our students to make sure that they're fully involved? And how can students add value to the services we offer? And true engagement, what this model is suggesting is that true engagement should be about working in partnership and working in communities. So if we think about, if you're designing a coaching program for your students, how do you involve your students in that coaching program? Do you just write the coaching program and then deliver it? Or do you talk to your students and get them involved and get their input to say that, well, actually, we should do it this way, or it should be this part, this should be part of the assessment? Do you involve your students in designing those types of coaching programs and designing how you put on a new teaching aspect, etc.? Do you do that? So this model is suggesting that if we're good teachers and we're good coaches, we really should work in partnership with our students to get the full benefits. Next slide, please, Pranesh.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's coming up. Now, this is it's a little bit, there's quite a lot of here. So I'm just going to break this model down. So this is taking the model this is taking engagement to the next step. And it's really looking into say, well, what factors may impact upon how we engage with our students, or how our students engage with us, the teachers, or with the college or the university or the school. And what the Canoe and Nelson model here is suggesting that there's lots of different factors that we need to take into account. So the first, if you look in the big bubble, if you look at the social cultural context, these are the external factors that may impact upon certain aspects of what we do in our day-to-day job and how we engage with our students. So, for example, political and the social environment. So how much money, if I give you an example, how much money does the Indian government put into sport at the moment in time in India? Is sport a big high priority on the policy and the way that your government, the Indian government, wants to work? Are they putting money into universities, to colleges, to schools? Are they getting more PE teachers enrolled, etc.? If it changes in a couple of years' time and there's a change in government and there's a different government comes in, is that policy going to change? So all these factors can play, the external factors can play, have a big impact and then filter down. So the external factors can impact then upon the if you look at the left-hand side of the box there, the structural influences. So for example, if the government of India is putting a lot of money into sport, there may be more money in your university or your school to say that, yeah, sport's a big part of what we do. It's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of designing curriculum programs. There's a big recruitment drive to get more PE teachers, etc. And then that can also influence then about the students. So students are recognising, well, sport's an important area. I want to work in sport. There's going to be more jobs created in sport in the future, etc. So all these factors can impact upon engagement actually in the classroom. And if you look at the middle box there where it says about the educational interface, it's saying that student engagement can be broken down into emotional, I don't know if you can see it very well there, emotional, cognitive and behaviour. So all these aspects, what the culture of the school's like, the college is like, what the teachers are like, their enthusiasm, their motivation can impact upon how the students then engage with you, the PE teachers, with the university, the school, and their levels of engagement. So some students might be really engaged and get involved in everything. Some of the students, for whatever reason, may be not engaged, disengaged. And then this results in outcomes. And if you look at the end of the model, then immediate outcomes and long-term outcomes. So some of the outcomes might be academic. So how do the students do? Do they get the coaching awards? Do they get the They get the certificates that are needed in high school to go on to the college or go on to university, etc. Some of it might be related to skills. Have they developed skills whilst they've been at the university or the school or the college? Have you developed them to reach their full potential? It could relate to how they feel about well-being and sense of pride. If they've achieved something, if they've engaged and they feel better about themselves. And then the longer term outcomes relate to, again, academic. Are we producing lifelong learners that always want to improve even when they've left school, college, universities? Are we producing global citizens that can give back to society? So the benefits can be short term and they can be long term, and it can have many different aspects about how we measure engagement and what the outcomes are. So the next slide, if you just click on the next slide, please, Pranesh.
Just a minute, please.
Could
you just explain this a bit, Dr. Ruth?
Yeah.
Thank you. मैडम ये बता रही थी कि मैडम ये जो एंगेजमेंट की बात कर रही हैं, हम जब हम कक्षा में कुछ भी पढ़ाते हैं तो हमें लगता है कि सिर्फ जो पढ़ा रहे हैं वो ही सीखना है, लेकिन मैडम बताते कि जब हम पढ़ाते हैं या कुछ भी सीख दे रहे हैं तो वो सिर्फ उस पे सिर्फ फोकस करे बगैर हमें देखना है कि हमारे छात्रों पे, बच्चों पे उस पे क्या असर पड़ता है, वो कहां तक उसका असर पड़ता है, वो उस तरीके से हमें बच्चों को सीख देनी चाहिए। तो इसलिए बता रही थी कि जैसे सामाजिक तरह पे जो हमारे रीति रिवाज है वो भी जरूर हम जिस तरह से सिखाते हैं उस पे आता है। अब यूनिवर्सिटी लेवल पे या स्कूल लेवल पे हम बताते कि मैडम बताती है हमारे भारत में खेल के लिए कितना ज्यादा प्राथमिकता दी गई है, कितना जो हमें आर्थिक तरह से जो कितने पैसे इसमें लगाए जा रहे हैं, इसको एक प्रायोरिटाइज करके दिया जा रहा है, क्या इसमें इतना खर्चा दे पा रहे हैं हम, और इसमें हम लोग बच्चों की जो बैकग्राउंड है और ये किस तरह से हम बच्चों को पूरा देख के उनको उसके आधार पे उनको हम सीख दे रहे हैं। और इसके अलावा हम जब बच्चों को साथ लेते हैं, क्या हम सिर्फ उनको पढ़ाई सिखा रहे हैं कि पढ़ाई के साथ साथ उसके साथ जो उनको मिलता है उस तरह का शिक्षा दे रहे हैं, वो भी जरूरी है। तो इसमें जब हम बोलते हैं एजुकेशन, जो अभी नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में इस पे बहुत ज्यादा ध्यान दिया गया है, इसीलिए हम देख रहे हैं शारीरिक शिक्षा भी उसमें आ गई है। लेकिन जब हम सिखाते हैं कुछ भी, अभी मैडम बताइए हम कोचिंग भी करते होंगे, लेकिन इसमें क्या हम कोचिंग में हम वॉलीबॉल का कोई भी खेल भी करा रहे हैं, क्या उससे हम बच्चों की जो उसकी कॉन्फिडेंस बढ़ा रहे हैं, उसकी क्षमता और अपने जो आत्मशक्ति है हम उसके लिए सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस क्या बढ़ा रहे हैं, मानसिक तौर पे उस खेल के दौरान वो काफी कुछ ऐसे सिखा रहे हैं जिससे कि वो जो भी सीख ले रहे हैं वो उनके लिए एक जिंदगी की एक सीख है। लेकिन हम लोग ये भी सिखाते हैं जब हम टीम में रहते हैं कि कैसे हम लोग सब आपस में मिलजुल के कैसा करना चाहिए। लेकिन ये सब होके आखिर यही होते है, जो भी सीख होती है वो सिर्फ उस समय के लिए नहीं है, किस तरह से एक बदलाव व्यवहार के तौर पे हमारे में आ जाए जो आगे चल के हमको बहुत ज्यादा फायदा हो सकता है। तो हम जब भी बोलते हैं इसमें बताया कि इमीडिएटली माने उसी समय जो हमारे में हम चाहते हैं और थोड़े समय के बाद, लेकिन उस समय हम शायद एक स्किल सीखना चाहते होंगे, लेकिन स्किल सीखने के साथ साथ क्या उसके साथ हम कुछ और भी सीखते हैं जो हमें जिंदगी के लिए सीख होती है। तो मैडम इस तरह से एक बहुत अच्छा, मैडम का जो सेशन है ये बहुत अच्छा है। जब से मैडम ने पिछले बार क्लास किया, मैंने भी अपनी कक्षा में जब भी पढ़ाती हूँ, मैं सिर्फ वो टॉपिक के अलावा मैं देखती हूँ कि बच्चों में और क्या उसके साथ साथ और क्या सीख मिल सकती है, उस तरह से मैंने भी अपने साथ लागू करने की कोशिश की। थैंक यू मैम, थैंक्स अ लॉट।
Okay, thanks Dr. Usher. Next slide please, Pranesh.
Can you see?
So if you think about the Kanu model there, and if you think about your students that you teach and coach, and if you think about an engaged student, what are the advantages? How does that show itself if you've got a student that's engaged in class or in extra activities, etc.? Well, the main advantage that we can think about, if there's lots of research looking at student engagement, what are the advantages and what are the barriers? And if all the researchers are suggesting that these are the main advantages, academic achievement. If you've got a student that's engaged, is asking questions, is participating, turns up for everything, then that can lead to academic achievement, whether that's higher grades, pass marks, etc. It can also lead to increased skill development. So you can get students that become more independent, they become more independent learners, they're more critical thinkers, they can analyze, they can start to look at information and synthesize and ask questions, and they can become what we describe as deeper learners. So those are two of the main skill development sets as well. It can also lead to advantages of social, behavioural, emotional and motivational outcomes. So your students, can their ability to make friends, an engaged student often makes friends more easily. Conflict resolution. So if there's tension, if there's people falling out, they're good at conflict resolution. It can also increase their social awareness and their skills in empathy and emotional intelligence. It can also have the advantage of helping the profile of the educational institution that you work in, the school, the university or the college. If you've got students that are happy, are committed, are engaged, it can raise the image because they're talking about this great school or this great coaching department or this great university. It can raise the image that you can have students that have a stronger affiliation. They're happy to talk that I'm from St. Francis's, or I'm from Northumbria University, or I'm from this Kerala coaching college, etc. So it can have a stronger affiliation. They're proud to talk about their institution, their school. And it can also help student loyalty and student retention. So less students drop out of the institution, drop out of school, drop out of college. And ultimately, it can help in community and society as well. So you get students that become rounded individuals. They're not just there for the academic achievement. They want to help society. They become what we call global citizens. They get involved in volunteering events or students with social and humanitarian beliefs and values. And this is really what every society, every government, every teacher wants to create: students that do well in their academic studies, but become rounded global citizens that are good for society, that are good for humanity, and recognise the bigger picture. So there's many advantages associated with student engagement. Next slide, please, Pranesh. But whilst we recognise there's many advantages, there's also barriers to student engagement. So think about your students now that you teach, and think about what stops them getting involved, what stops them participating, what stops them joining extra clubs or societies, what stops them from asking questions in class, etc. And lots of research has been written around looking at what are the barriers that stop students engaging. We know what the advantages are, so why doesn't every student engage? Well, one of the main reasons and barriers is the personality of the student. So we know that not everybody's confident or outgoing. People have different levels of confidence. So the personality, if you've got a student that feels isolated, is quiet, is shy, finds it difficult to make friends or socialise, might suffer from anxiety or mental well-being, those are major barriers that can stop students feeling confident to go out and get involved in joining groups and stuff like that. So the personality of the student can be a major barrier. Other barriers can be financial barriers. So if you've got students, if you're putting on extra clubs or societies, there may be a financial fee. To go to some schools, to some colleges, you have to pay. So are they stopping, are financial barriers stopping students from getting involved and getting engaged? Other commitments. So do your students have family to look after? You might have more mature students in university where they've got children. They might have to look after older parents. They might have to work, so the work-life balance. So other commitments can be a major barrier to students engaging. The institutional culture. So the colleges and the universities and the schools that you work in now, what's the culture like? Is it a culture where you want students to be involved? You want students to have a voice? You want the students to feel as though they sense they have an identity, they belong in your institution? Or is it a culture where actually it's quite a cold environment? It's quite in a sort of authoritarian. The students are the students, we're the staff. So what's the culture like? The culture of an organisation can have a big play on whether that's perceived as a barrier or whether that's actually a really good thing for us to get involved with our students. Other barriers that have been recognised are large class sizes or generic systems. So I work in a university that's got 30,000 students. Sometimes I can teach a class of up to 200, 300 students. That can be quite intimidating. How do I get my students to feel engaged in a class size of 300? You might be taking a PE session or a coaching session where you've got 50 to 100 children. And that can be intimidating. You don't know the names of all the students. You don't know their individual circumstances. You don't know what the personalities are. So that can be a barrier to engagement as well. And generic systems. So does your school, college, university, does your institution have generic systems that we just expect every student to be exactly the same? And we just treat them as numbers, really, when we know that really everybody's different, everybody's diverse, everybody has different motivations. So a generic system with a large number of students is really hard to manage, and it can be a perceived barrier to engagement. The role of the staff.
Dr. Rose, could you just explain once again generic systems?
Say that again.
Generic systems by an example.
Yeah, so a generic system. So if I use my example in my university, we might have a generic system of, for example, induction. So the university, every September, we have about 20,000 students that start in our university, and we have a generic induction system where you have to make sure the student knows this, 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 this. But all the students are different. The sports students are very different to the business students, are very different to the law students, are very different to the nursing students. So it's a generic system where, because you have generic systems for economies of scale, because it's easier. If you're running a big organization where you have many students, you have to have some sort of generic system. But we know that the sports students are very different to the nursing students, to the law students, to the engineering students. So often that can be a barrier because it's a different type of student population or a different type of student cohort that you're working with. So is your institution in India, do they have generic systems in place where they just expect you to do this generic system, even though your students may not engage with that system process? Does that explain it, Dr. Usher?
For it.
Is that okay? Okay. So then another barrier to student engagement is the role of staff. Now think about you, think about your personality, and think about how you teach or how you coach. How do you involve your students? How do you interact with your tutors? How do you interact with your athletes? And think about, does the way you work and the way you interact, does that put up a barrier for people wanting to ask questions or suggesting that we do it a different way? So every different teacher has different ways of interacting with their students. And some teaching staff can be quite strict and say, I'm the expert here, I know what I'm talking about, and they don't invite questions or they don't invite suggestions. And then you've got other staff that are the other side of the continuum that want to get students involved, they want to ask questions, they want to get their ideas, they want to empower the students to be involved and feel part of that journey. So the role of the staff can either be a real positive aspect to engagement, or it can be a barrier. So just think in the next 20 seconds, what's your personality like, and how do you interact with your students or your PET or your students as well in the classroom or on the coaching field? And then the final barrier can be the learning style and ability of the student. We know if we're teaching a class of 10 or teaching a class of 100 students, those students are all different. They've all got different ways to learn. They've all got different abilities. Not every student is going to be an A+ star student in maths or English, but equally, not every student's going to be representing India at the next Olympic Games. Everybody has different things that they can offer. And the really great teachers are the teachers that recognize this student is great at this, is good at that, needs help with this, and they can mold that student and work with that student to make sure that they achieve whatever they want to do. And those are what great teachers do. So that's the barriers to engagement as well. So if we just go on to the next slide, please, Pranesh. How are we doing for time? So what I've been doing over the past 4 years is doing a big research study looking at some of the barriers and advantages of engagement. And I've looked at it from an academic and non-academic engagement. And I've looked in higher education, so universities only. I've looked at the role of the staff, so the 3 aims, role of the staff and students. So I've asked the students, what are the advantages and what are the barriers? But I've also asked staff, what are the advantages and barriers? And I've asked academic staff and professional support staff. So not just the teachers, not just the doctors or the professors, but I've asked people that are involved in the library, careers, health and well-being. So I've got it from all different angles. And we've looked at the benefits of student engagement and the barriers to student engagement. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So my methodology then, I mentioned it was over 3 years, and we did a qualitative approach and a quantitative approach. We looked at 2 different methodologies. Study 1 involved looking at interviewing 14 staff working in higher education. I've mentioned we looked at the professional support staff and academic staff. Study 2 was focus groups with students that studied a variety of different disciplines, not just sport. They studied law, biology, biochemistry, etc. And then I did a big quantitative study, an online survey, looking at 1,400 students studying higher education in the UK, not just UK students, but international students as well, fed into that survey. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So the first thing we looked at was looking at the advantages. What did staff and students think were the main advantages of student engagement? And they came up with 3 main areas, and that was advantages to the individual student, advantages to the educational institution that they were associated with, and advantages to society. So those were the 3 areas that were classified as the main advantages. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So when we looked at what did students think engagement was from an individual perspective, what types of advantages were beneficial to them if they engaged with their university. And some statements from the staff, but students also agreed that student engagement can help individuals in particular. These were some of the quotes. If it says A, that's an academic member of staff. If it says S, then that's a professional support staff. So they agreed that student engagement can help in skill development in particular, so helping develop skills of being part of that university. It can also help in your happiness and well-being. It can make you feel better. And there's so much stuff at the moment about mental health and well-being, particularly with the pandemic going on. So the idea that engagement can help with students' happiness and well-being was a really positive factor. It can also help build relationships. So you can make new friends, you can make new network, you can develop relationships with staff and have good interactions with them, etc. It can also help in academic achievement. So you can get good marks, academic marks, good degree classifications. And it can also help improve your career aspects. So you can go on and get that dream job at the end of your academic studies too. So those were the main advantages associated with the individual. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So the second thing then was the educational institution. And again, staff and students agreed that there were many advantages to be had from an educational institution, including helping to motivate staff. So you know that if you're in a classroom where the students are involved, they're interacting, they're all turning up, they're all doing the work, they're asking questions, it can make you feel better. You know when you've delivered a good session, you know when you've delivered a good coaching session, that people are involved. If you go in a classroom and they all sit there with their hands folded and they're not asking questions or whatever, it doesn't help motivate you. So having good student engagement can help the staff and motivate the staff too. It can help with teaching and learning. So we know that if you've got lots of debate going on or lots of people getting involved or group work or teamwork, it can help enhance teaching and learning. It can also help with marketing and promotion. If you've got students that are talking about your university, that Northumbria is a great place to go, the culture's really good, there's lots of opportunities, the staff are really nice, I feel as though I'm part of that university. If you've got students talking like that, it can help promote the university. So it can help with the branding and reputation. So that if our students go overseas and they're going to India on a placement, they're saying, oh, you should try Northumbria, look up Northumbria, etc., because they're really happy and they're really involved and they want to be part of us. And it can also help connections with industry. So industry can hear about you, that they want to get involved. They know that we've got good students who are engaged, who do really well, who get academic achievement, but go beyond that. So people start to come to you to say that, you know, what's going on here, so it can help connections with industry too. So there's great benefits to be had to the educational institution. Next slide, please, Pranesh. And then the final advantages were that people said was that of society. So we can, as mentioned before, when we looked at the previous literature, we can have students, if you look at that first quote, they're more rounded individuals, students that succeed in life and do better for themselves and people. They become global citizens, they're open-minded and see everything as a learning opportunity. So this idea of global citizenship, well-rounded individuals, not just in it for themselves, they're in it for society, they want to give back. They might get involved in volunteering. There might be students that want to help the local community and wider society. This was a big aspect that we said, if we've got students engaged, this can help society become a better place for everybody. So those were the major advantages: individual, educational institution, and also society gains as well. Next slide, please, Pranesh. And then when we asked the students and staff about what were the barriers that stopped them being able to engage with their students. So the major barriers that staff suggested that stopped them engaging. Now, this might hit home to some of you. So think about what stops you in your job being able to fully engage with your students. So the main thing that came out was linked to resources. So not enough resources. So at the moment, if you think about staffing, so the classroom sizes that you teach in or your coaching sessions, how many students are in the class? Is it 100? Is it 200? Is it more? Is it less? Would extra staff help you? No, it would in my situation. So if I'm teaching to a class of 200 students, it would be far better if I was teaching to a class of 50 students or 25 students. So lack of resources was a major barrier that stops staff being able to fully engage. And that's often linked to finance, but it can also be lack of resources with regards to space and time. There's just not enough hours in your week to be able to engage, or there's not enough space. If you've got 200 students and you've got to put on a coaching session in badminton, in hockey or whatever, have you got enough space to utilise, to put them into a gym or to put them into an outdoor field, etc.? So resources was a major barrier for engaging fully with their staff. The second major barrier was operational. So again, this links to the size, the number of the students, but also worryingly was this concept of staff buy-in. So staff didn't feel as though it was their responsibility. They would put on a teaching class, but that was it. It was this lack of, well, engagement's not my job, it's somebody else's job. But there was also lack of awareness of engagement opportunities. So a lot of the academic staff didn't know what the professional support staff were putting on, whether that was health and wellbeing sessions, whether it was sports clubs, whether it was career events, etc. So this lack of awareness between the different staff areas was also identified as an issue. The third major barrier was that linked to processes and systems. So again, this links to lack of coordination. And what staff commented on was that often the hierarchy, the bosses, the people at the top of the organisation will make policies or suggestions of how we do things, but the teaching staff at the bottom of the organisation, at the operational side, it didn't work out. So the top staff would come up with all these ideas and policies that really you couldn't operationalize for whatever reason. So there was tension there between the big bosses and also the people that worked lower down, who were delivering the teaching, the coaching, etc. And this concept of this centralized approach, that this one size fits all. So if they put on an event for nurses, it's very different to putting on an event for sports students, because sports students are very different to nursing students, are very different to engineering students. So this centralized idea and this strategic idea doesn't always work out. And this concept of having a standardized approach and treating every student as the same was a barrier, was a tension, because we know as good teachers, we know that all our students are different, have different personalities, etc. And then the fourth barrier was that of students and customers. So you'll know that right around the world, there's different concepts where people have to pay for tuition or education in some countries. In other countries, it may be free. So this whole concept of students, are the students or are the customers? And there was a big debate there about, well, the students. So some academics said the students. So the students, I know what I'm talking about. I'm the teacher. I've got the PhD. The students, where other people suggested, well, the customers. And they, because they're paying an awful lot of money to be in our university, they have a right, they have a say about how we deliver, how we engage, etc. So this whole idea of students and customers and tensions was something that came out as a barrier too. And it comes back to the personality of the teaching staff and how do they perceive engagement, and how important is it to you as a teacher or a coach to be able to engage with your students. And that comes down to individual personality. So those were the major barriers for the staff. Next slide, please, Banesh. And then when we asked the students, well, what are the barriers to you? What stops you getting involved in engaging, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's joining clubs and societies, whether it's getting involved in volunteering, etc. So the major barriers that came out for the students were other commitments. So they had maybe children to look after. They may have to look after family, parents. They may have somebody that was ill in the family that they had to look after. Or also a lot of the students worked. So they had to balance this work and academia too. Another barrier that was interesting that came out was transitioning. So what is expected of your students when they enter your school, your college, your university? And this concept of anxiety, not quite knowing when you start, you know what it felt like when you started school or you went to a university on your first day. Were you anxious? Were you not quite sure what was expected? What was the university? What was the college expecting? So this was a perceived barrier. If students don't feel as though they know what's going on or what's expected, that was an interesting thing that came through. Size of the class. They didn't like large classes. They didn't like this blanket approach. It was difficult for them to interact. Learning difficulties. So, we know that every student's different, but if you've got learning difficulties and you may have some different, whether it's different sides of not being able to interact or whatever, but learning difficulties can make you feel anxious or stop you being able to engage. Cultural differences. So we have a lot of international students in our university. So a language barrier can be a barrier to stopping students engage, but also intercultural differences. So how aware are we of intercultural skills? So an Indian student and their way of learning and studying might be very different to a Chinese student or to a student from the USA or so all these things can be barriers, and great teachers know intercultural skills, and they'll know that there's many different ways of interacting, and there's many different ways of bringing your values and your belief systems and seeing that all those systems can work perfectly, but we just need to be aware of them. Dr. Usher, I'm aware that in the chat there's lots of people saying, can we translate? Do you just want to translate that or not? Dr. Usher?
Yeah. सो मैम बता रही थी कि बच्चों में क्या बाधाएं आ रही है एंगेजमेंट में। जब देखा जाए जो बच्चे पढ़ते, जब वो पढ़ने के साथ साथ उनको और भी काम करनी पड़ती है, उनके और भी चीजों पे ध्यान देना पड़ता है। इसलिए कई बार जो हम एंगेजमेंट का जो बता रहे थे वो काम हो नहीं पाता, उनको घर पे काम करना पड़ता है, उन्हें और भी चीजें देखना पड़ता है। और उसके अलावा ये कि हमें पता है कि कई बच्चों में ये साथ में इनको जो बताया गया उस पे समझौता नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, इससे उनकी एंग्जाइटी बढ़ सकती है। और इसमें अगर आप टीचर से आप देखेंगे कि आपके क्लास में अगर 50 या 60 बच्चे हैं, कई बार हमें एक एक समय पर अलग अलग कक्षा आ रही है, तो हमें इन बच्चों का नाम भी शायद याद रखना मुश्किल होगा। जब क्लास की साइज बढ़ती है तब भी हमको पढ़ाने में मुश्किल पड़ जाता है। फिर हम देखते हैं कि बच्चे एक समान नहीं पढ़ते, कई बच्चे जल्दी पढ़ पाते हैं, हम उसको लर्निंग डिफिकल्टीज बोलते हैं। लेकिन उसमें अगर एक अध्यापक जो बहुत अच्छा, वो क्या करेगा, बच्चों के मुताबिक उनको कैसा चाहिए उसके मुताबिक उनको पढ़ाते हैं, तो उससे सीख सही होगी। और दूसरी बात है जो हम लोग हमारी जो रीति रिवाज है उसके मुताबिक हम देख रहे हैं, हमारी भारत में ही अलग अलग हमारी जो भाषाएं, तो उसमें हमारी रीति रिवाज भी बिल्कुल अलग है। लेकिन क्या हम सब मिलजुल के जो जब हम कक्षा में पढ़ाते हैं तो वो सब छोड़ के सबको एक समान देख के करा सकते हैं? तो ये सारी बाधाएं हैं जिससे कि स्टूडेंट एंगेजमेंट सही होता नहीं है। तो अभी पहले मैंने बताया कि हमको क्या क्या फायदे हैं, लेकिन अभी बता रहे हैं कि क्या क्या बाधाएं हैं। वो स्टाफ के लिए भी हो सकता है या बच्चों के लिए भी। यस मैम।
Okay, thanks, Dr. Usha. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So some further barriers that students identified was staff buy-in. So you will know what type of teacher you are, and you will know who the popular teachers are in your...
Dr. Ruth, what is buy-in?
Buy-in.
Buy-in.
It's what's your approach to engagement? So what's your personality like and how do you engage? So if we say that staff buy in, they're on board, they're enthusiastic about student engagement.
Thanks, please.
Okay. So staff buy-in, so the role of staff and what interests do you have with your students? So do you just turn up at a teaching session or a coaching session, put on the session and leave, and that's your hour done? Or have you got real interest in the students? Have you got real interest to know that Jack or Jane or Peter or Mary, you want them to reach their full potential? So this is all about the enthusiasm of the teaching staff. Lack of support. So another particular barrier that student mentioned was if they don't get much support from their family or important people to them. So how much support do the family, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, whether it's sisters, aunts, uncles, or whatever, do they get support? If they don't get support, it can be more difficult because students don't really know where they want to go in life or what they want to achieve. Also, this idea about being difficult to join in. So how easy is it for students to join in your institution, to join in your club that you're running, to join in a group piece of work? So we know that students that have got the shy or they've got an introvert personality, they can find it awkward. So how easy do we make and facilitate and coordinate it easy for students to join in whatever activities we're putting on? Another particular barrier was that of financial. So again, we mentioned this, that if it's expensive, if you put on a volunteering, if you put on a new club or a society, a badminton club after school, and there's a cost associated with that, does that stop some people from being able to join in? Going to university, we know that there's a cost. We know that it's expensive. Do students have access to loans? Do students have access to those financial opportunities to be able to go and join in those types of activities? Mental health issues. If you've got students that suffer from depression or anxiety or loneliness, that will stop them. That will be a perceived barrier that will stop them from being able to engage. And also lack of confidence and motivation. So if you've got people that are quite shy, timid, get anxious about new opportunities or new ways of working or joining a new college or university, lack of confidence and motivation will stop people from getting involved and engaging. So those were the major barriers then that we've identified from staff and also from students. Next slide, please, Pranesh. Now, this is a little bit difficult to see, but I'm sure you'll be able to access these slides and make it bigger yourself. But when we took the findings then from what we did for the first two studies, and then we did a big a big statistical analysis from the data, and we did some results that we did further analysis using quantitative survey to investigate the types of student engagement. So if you look at the blue column on the left-hand side, we looked at, well, what type of engagement activity did students do? Was it academic? Was it non-academic, etc.? Did they get involved in teamwork? Did they join clubs or societies? And we asked students to rate how high or low it was important to them to be involved in clubs, to be involved in volunteering, to be involved in society. And then we also looked at the role of the student. Were they proactive in engaging in those activities? And did they want to co-create? Did they want to work in partnership? We also looked at what were the advantages that were deemed important to them. And we looked at what are the barriers that stopped them engaging. So we did that on the left-hand side, and we looked at all the different aspects, and we did some cluster analysis and some factor analysis. And this table shows us that depending upon the value that they placed in each factor, we then undertook a cluster analysis to determine if we could put students into different types of groupings based upon how they answered these questions. So some students might want to go to university because they just wanted to participate in the clubs or societies. That was more important. Whereas we might have another type of student that went to university because they wanted to get a degree, a first-class degree, they wanted to develop new skills, etc. So we did this big factor and cluster analysis, and we came up with four different types of student groupings that we could work with. Next slide, please, Manesh. So the four different types of student typologies that we could say that this type of student we call a cognitive team player. This type of student would fall into this type of category, a badge wearer. The third type of student was an inquisitive learner, and the fourth type of student was a societal climber. And I'll explain what these different types of students looked like and what their profile looked like. Next slide, please, Pranesh. So the cognitive team players were students who view highly cognitive and student team engagement. They were really interested in academic studies, they were cognitive thinkers, and they liked to work in teams to engage. There were students who wanted to challenge themselves academically and intellectually to undertake the best work they could and demonstrate to others that they had the ability to analyse, synthesise and apply theory to practice. So they were really the kind of intellectual students, the academic students that wanted to achieve high academic attainment. But they're also keen to work with other students, so they like teamwork if it was on academic matters. The main barriers to them with regards to engagement was poor student-tutor relationships. So they wanted to have really good relationships with the teachers, other commitments and lack of social fit. They were the major barriers that they wanted to be involved with the teachers, but if they had other commitments, whether it was work or family, or if they didn't feel as though they fitted in, then that would be a perceived barrier. So those were the cognitive team players. Next slide, please.
Just a minute, Dr. Ruth, I'll just explain this. मैम ने अभी सर्वे लेने के बाद इनको 4 कैटेगरी में उनको डिवाइड किया बच्चों को. तो सबसे पहला था जो कॉग्निटिव टीम प्लेयर्स, माने संज्ञानात्मक जो टीम के खिलाड़ी हैं उनके बारे में. ये लोग ज्यादातर ये जो पढ़ाई में बहुत अच्छे हैं, अपने आप को बहुत बुद्धिमान समझते हैं, वो बच्चे इस कैटेगरी में आते हैं. तो क्योंकि वो बहुत जल्दी जो भी बताते हैं उसको सीख पाते हैं और सीख के उसको प्रैक्टिस सीख में लाके उसको वो इम्प्लीमेंट प्रैक्टिस भी कर पाते हैं. ये लोग कोशिश करते हैं कि ये लोग दूसरे बच्चों से एकेडमिक के मामले में अच्छा कर पाए, लेकिन इनको सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि ये दूसरे जो अध्यापक के साथ या औरों के साथ उनका जो मेल जोल है वो थोड़ा सा कम रहता है। वो सामाजिक तौर पे वो इतना अच्छी तरह से उनमें कमी पड़ती है। लेकिन ये लोग काफी बुद्धिमान है, कौशल है, लेकिन ये लोग बहुत जल्दी सीख पाते हैं। तो ये एक पर्टिकुलर कैटेगरी का आया है, ये एक ग्रुप है जो मैडम का सबसे पहले कैटेगरी था। यस मैम, थैंक्स।
Okay, thanks, Dr. Usher. Next slide, please, Banesh. So the badge wearers then, the types of students that we would classify and call them that they're badge wearers. These were students that were mainly interested in non-academic engagement activities, such as volunteering or participating in sports clubs and societies. So they see co-creating as very important, and their main advantage of engagement is being proud to be associated with their university. So people that wore the sports jerseys and the badge of the university and went to play football or hockey or swimming or whatever, these were seen as badge wearers. They thought that the reputation of the university is extremely valuable to them, and they feel very much part of the community in a sense of belonging at their institution. They're proud to say that they're from this institution, and they wear all the merchandise that shows that they're a student of this institution. And their main motivation for engagement is to be seen to represent the university outside of academic engagement. So they weren't that too bothered about academic certificates, academic awards, but they were really bothered about representing the university for non-academic purposes. Do you want to translate that, Dr.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. मैम ने बताया था जो दूसरा है उसको बैच वेयरर्स का जो कैटेगरी में आते हैं, तो ये वो है गैर शैक्षणिक, जो कि एकेडमिक में नहीं है। ये बच्चे हैं, ये जो छात्र हैं, ये लोग पढ़ाई के इसमें ज्यादा नहीं होते, लेकिन वो लोग अपनी सेवा करना चाहते हैं खेल के द्वारा, और ये बताना चाहते हैं कि ये जिस यूनिवर्सिटी या संस्थान के ये वहां के, तो अपने आप को बहुत ज्यादा अच्छा समझते हैं कि वो इस संस्थान को बिलोंग करते हैं, हम इसके लिए करें। तो ये लोग सेवा के तौर पे ज्यादा करना चाहते हैं। उनको लगता है कि वो इस संस्थान के अंग है, और इसमें पढ़ाई के अलावा ये देखते हैं कि वो किस तरह से अपने संस्थान को रिप्रेजेंट कर पाते हैं। तो उनका जो मेन उद्देश्य रहता है कि ये उद्देश्य है कि किस तरह से वो खेल के द्वारा या जो भी है एक संस्थान में पढ़ाई से बाहर होके वो किस तरह से यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम ले, वो बोलेंगे हम इस यूनिवर्सिटी को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, तो उनमें उनको बहुत अच्छा सा लगता है। तो ये कैटेगरी हुआ था बैच वेयरर्स का। यस मैम, थैंक्स मैम।
Next slide, please, Banesh. And then the third type of student body was what we call inquisitive learners. So these were students who view social interaction as the main driver for engagement. So how many students do you teach where they're constantly on the phone, on the social media network, and they've got so many friends in the network, and they've got so many followers and so many likes? These are the types of people who we classify as inquisitive learners, that they wanted to have a big network and circle of friends and be seen to be popular. So students who view social interaction as the main driver, they're keen to discuss academic work and performance with university staff, teachers, but also like to talk about university outside of the classroom with peers, family and friends. So how many students do you know that go home and talk to the parents or the aunts and uncles or brothers and sisters or friends about what they've done in school that day or university that day? The main barrier to engagement is associated with social learners is the fear of social integration. So where they often may struggle in new situations or get anxious if they do not know where all the information is from. So they like to be organized, they like to know exactly what they're doing, they like to know what's expected of them, etc. And such students like to be prepared and have all the information to hand to avoid stress or losing confidence. So these would be classified as the inquisitive learners.
जो तीसरा कैटेगरी था, इसको बोलते हैं जो जिज्ञासु के जो छात्र हैं, वो काफी उनको हर कुछ सीखने का उनको मौका लगता है, उनको अच्छा लगता है। तो ये छात्र जो है ये ज्यादा सामाजिक तौर पे ये लोग संबंध बनाते हैं, और ये जो भी है एकेडमिक विषय जो भी पढ़ाई करते हैं उसके विषय के बारे में चर्चा सिर्फ अपने जो स्टाफ के अलावा बाहर भी जाके दूसरे फ्रेंड्स के साथ और लोगों के साथ भी उनको शेयर करते हैं। तो इसमें ये लोग अपना संस्थान के बारे में या स्कूल के बारे में या यूनिवर्सिटी के बारे में बहुत अच्छा जो है एकेडमिक तौर पे वो बोल पाते, लेकिन वो उसी तरह पर बोल पाते जिसके लिए वो ऑलरेडी तैयार है, जिसके बारे में उनको जानकारी है। लेकिन इनका एक सबसे बड़ा ये जो बाधा है, ये है कि जिसके बारे में अगर नया माहौल में रखा जाए, कुछ ऐसा खबर दी जाए जिसके या एकेडमिक तौर पे बोला जाए जिसके बारे में उनको समझ नहीं है, तब वो उसके साथ वो अपने आप को एडजस्ट नहीं कर पाते हैं, उसमें समझौता करना उनको बहुत मुश्किल रहता है। तो इसलिए ऐसे छात्र चाहते हैं कि अगर किसी भी चीज को उसको पहले ही वो तैयार रखे और सारी जानकारी उनको पहले होगा, तभी वो बहुत अच्छी तरह से कर पाएंगे, नहीं तो वो तनाव में आ जाते हैं जब एक सिचुएशन नया होता है। Yes, now I go to the next slide. Yes,
next slide, Pranesh.
Yeah, I'm doing it for you. Pranay is out. I'm doing it, mom. Yes.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
The next final type of groupings is that what we call societal climbers, excuse me. And these are students who are deemed to be proactive and motivated to engage for social status and global citizen purposeship. So, we mentioned about students that wanted to be rounded and wanted to give back to society and be seen as global citizens. These are the people that we've classified as societal climbers. And they're keen to use university to make new friends and increase their social network. And they view external things like fundraising societies, volunteering, helping society as a really important part of university life. They're confident, they're outgoing, and they're not really concerned about new situations. They've got those types of outgoing personality and charisma where that doesn't concern them. The main barriers to them engaging, though, is that societal movers and climbers that they view as important is lack of support from family. So if they don't feel supported from their family or friends, that would stop them engaging, as well as large classroom sizes. So these are people that would be classified as societal climbers.
जो चौथा है वो है जैसे सामाजिक तौर पे जो आगे बढ़ रहे हैं वैसे छात्र होते हैं। तो ये छात्र काफी इनमें काफी जोश होता है, जो सामाजिक तौर पे वो एक पूरी दुनिया की नागरिकता के तौर पे पहुंचने की उनका उद्देश्य वही रहता है। तो वो यूनिवर्सिटी या स्कूल या जो भी संस्थान है उसको प्रयोग बनाते हैं। इसमें ये नए नए जो दोस्त या सहपाठी या फ्रेंड्स बनाते हैं नेटवर्किंग के द्वारा, और इसके द्वारा आप कई बार देखेंगे बहुत छात्र ऐसा है जैसे पैसे की कमी है, वो लोग अपना पैसा कैसे भी लाके, किसी को कुछ भी तकलीफ है तो किस से फंड बनाना है, आर्थिक स्थिति को कैसे हमें कुछ प्रोग्राम करना है, हम कैसे उसके लिए पैसा इकट्ठा करें और सेवा करना, संस्थान के लिए या समाज के लिए सेवा करना। ये लोग समाज के लिए बहुत अच्छा कुछ करते हैं और वो यूनिवर्सिटी के तौर पे यूनिवर्सिटी के द्वारा करते हैं। तो इससे ये लोग इनमें काफी अच्छी क्षमता, ये काफी कॉन्फिडेंट जाते हैं। इनको आप कोई भी नया माहौल में रखेंगे, इन लोगों को तनाव नहीं होता, भी बहुत अच्छी तरह से उसमें उभर आते हैं। लेकिन इनको सिर्फ ये बाधाएं हैं कि इनका कई बार अगर इनका जो घर में परिवार से उनको कोई सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा है या उनके दोस्तों से सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा है या बहुत बड़ी क्लास कक्षा है जहां नहीं संभाल पा रहे, ये उनकी बाधाएं हैं। लेकिन इसमें ये दुनिया की नागरिकता जो है ये इनका मेन उद्देश्य। यस मैम।
Next slide, please, Pranesh. So to conclude then, what did our studies over those 3 years find then? Well, we found that student engagement is multifaceted and it's delivered by many people, not involved in education, not just academics or coaches or teachers, but it involves professional support staff as well. We recognise that the student population is diverse and they all have different views and needs from engagement. And often success with engagement is only measured in a linear way. So if you think about your institution where you work, often the bosses, the senior people in the organisation will say, well, we're really good at engagement because we have 99% of students pass our qualifications, or we've recruited 10,000 students this year, or we've awarded 100 first class degree classifications. So often it's only measured in a linear way, where we've looked at the research that says, well, some students don't just want academic achievements, they want other things. So we need to look at engagement in a bigger picture. So if you look at students will view a return on investment in many ways. So some people might find that creating a bigger network or making more friends or helping society is just as important or not even more important than academic achievement. But do we measure that in our university or our school or our college? So non-academic engagement is just as important to many students as academic engagement. But what often happens is we put all the emphasis on academic engagement only, and we don't look at the bigger picture about how engagement is helping that student, that individual, grow in so many different ways. Do you want to just translate that, Doctor?
Yeah. मैम ये बता रही थी कि जो छात्रों की जो हम लोग अभी हम भी पढ़ाते हैं बच्चों को, लेकिन जब पढ़ाते हैं तो सिर्फ बच्चों पे सिर्फ हमारा जो शिक्षक के रूप में नहीं, बहुत सारे और भी लोग हैं जिसका उन पे असर पड़ता है। तो इसमें हम देखते हैं कि इसमें कई जैसे एक्टर्स का इस तरह से बोला गया, क्योंकि ये सिर्फ हम जब बच्चों को ही पढ़ाते हैं, हम सिर्फ एक एकेडमिक्स पे सिर्फ आने के उद्देश्य से नहीं है, हम देखते हैं कि अलग अलग स्तर पे इनमें क्या बदलाव या क्या सीख मिल पाती है। और बच्चे जो आ रहे हैं वो बहुत अलग अलग डाइवर्स माने अलग विभिन्न उनका जो लेवल होता है, और इसमें क्या है, इनकी जरूरतें भी अलग होती है। तो हमें चाहिए कि बच्चों की जरूरत देखिए, उनकी जो काबिलियत है, उनकी जो काबिलियत उसको कितना मैक्सिमम उभर पाए, क्योंकि बच्चे हर चीज में एक जैसा नहीं होंगे, उनमें कई होगा जो बहुत अच्छे गुण है, उस गुण को हम कैसे उभर पाएंगे। लेकिन हम काफी जगह देख चुके हैं कि स्कूल में या कॉलेज में कि वो लोग उसको इस तरह से मेजर करते कि अगर उसकी सिर्फ एकेडमिक के तौर पे कितनी फर्स्ट क्लास आई, से मैडम बता रही थी, कितने लोग इसमें से क्या 100% पास है, कि हम सिर्फ उस तौर पे हम लोग मेजर करते हैं। जब भी हम देखते हैं एकेडमिक अचीवमेंट या इतने बच्चों को प्लेसमेंट मिला, इतने को अवार्ड मिला, लेकिन इसके अलावा ये कभी नहीं सोचते कि इसके अलावा हमें और क्या देखना चाहिए। लेकिन जब बच्चों से पूछा गया है, बच्चों को लगा कि ये सीख में सिर्फ वो लोग बोलते जो हमें जो डिग्री मिल रहा है वो सिर्फ एक छोटी सी चीज है, उसके अलावा वो क्या चाहते थे कि इसमें आने के बाद ये काफी अच्छे दोस्त मिले और इन्होंने काफी कुछ सीखा, कैसे सेवा करना कैसे सीखा है, और ये किस तरह से हम समाज में सेवा कर सकते हैं, काफी कुछ सीख इसको मिल चुकी है। ये भी आए, लेकिन ये कहीं पर अभी मेंशन नहीं किया। तो मैडम ये बता रही थी कि जो एकेडमिक के अलावा जो गैर शैक्षणिक है उसको भी उसी तरह से हमें महत्व देना चाहिए। और अभी मेरे को लगता है ये जो नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी आई है, और आप सब लोग इसमें मेरे को लगता है कई प्रिंसिपल्स भी हैं, बहुत जरूरी है कि अगर आप ये लाएंगे, हम देखेंगे हमारे बच्चे बहुत अच्छी स्मार्ट होके बाहर निकलेंगे। अभी आप मैडम को ही देख रहे हैं, आप देखिए मैडम से ही हमें बहुत अच्छी सीख मिल रही है, क्योंकि सिर्फ पढ़ाने का नहीं, हर बच्चे का, अगर हम किसी बच्चे उन बच्चे का नाम देख के उसमें क्या गुण है हम उसको अगर उभर पाए, वो ये होता है, ये एक अध्यापक का सबसे बड़ा जो महत्व रोल है, जो रोल है। यस मैम, I'll go to the next one.
The final slide. Next slide, please, Panesh.
Yeah.
So what does this mean then for you, for us, for anybody working in education and anybody teaching? Well, the first thing, if anybody, any of the panelists are senior bosses or senior people in your institution, the first thing that we need to think about is senior leadership involvement. And there's the need for the message of engagement to come from the top of the institution, to say that engagement at every level, academic and non-academic, is important. And every person that works in a school, a college, an institution, regardless of your job or title, has a role to play in engagement. That's the first really important message, take-home message, that senior leadership need to send the message out that engagement is important, and that needs to filter through the whole institution. The second implication that would be good for teachers and coaches to take home is this idea of a student engagement working party, and looking at the strategic planning and resourcing of what's needed in your school, college, institution. So having a need for realistic resources planned in advance and not ad hoc. So if the classroom size is double, or if we need more teaching space, or if we need more staff, or if we're putting on this particular club or society, have we got enough resources in place, or if we're expecting too much from people? So we need to strategically look at the planning and the resourcing of engagement and map that throughout the student journey. And related to the student journeys, however long you've got students, whether you're at a school or college, however long, if that's 5 years, if it's 2 years, if it's 6 months, you need to plan and map the student journey, because they will need aspects of engagement at different times. And often we bombard students with engagement and say this way, but it's needed at different times in that journey. A student coming into an institution will look very different after a year, will look very different to when they graduate in 5-6 years' time. So good planning and good working in education will map the student journey and know when engagement activities will take place. But the biggest take-home point from this whole study to you as PE teachers and coaches is knowing the student typologies and not treating all students as the same. And this is where we get it wrong. This is where every institution gets it wrong, is we put on engagement activities and we treat them as what I call a blanket approach or a generic approach. And we know that everybody is different. If you were in a room of 5 people, my personality is different from your personality. My anxieties might be different to your anxieties. My confidence in certain things might be different to yours. But often we can teach a class and we teach them all the same way. So the best teachers know their students. They know what motivates them. They know what their anxieties are. They know how to get the best out of them. And the best teachers treat their students individually so that they can raise and make them fulfill whatever they want to achieve. So this whole idea of a centralized approach and a one-size-fits-all doesn't wash with me, doesn't work with me. And we should be able to empower the PE teachers, the coaches, the people that are teaching. We should give them autonomy to design engagement that fits with their students, because the PE teachers that work with the students day in, day out know those students, and they should be allowed to have autonomy to put on the engagement activities that work for your students. And the concepts of awareness campaigns and having student ambassadors and intervention strategies, and how much do you use your students as co-creators, really? Do you involve them in the classroom? Do you involve them in the lectures? Do you involve them in the coaching programs? Do you ask them to design? Do you have student reps on board that feed in and really have an input into what you want to achieve and what they want to achieve? So this whole concept of all this is really important, but the greatest teachers, the greatest coaches are the people that know who they're working with inside and out, know how to motivate them, know how to achieve what they want to achieve, and can make those students grow. And I'll just finish now, but I have no doubt that all of you, there's nearly 8,000 people on the call, never ever underestimate the really important job you play in helping students achieve great things. We might not hear it, we might not get feedback instantly, but what you are doing and how you're inspiring them, particularly in sport, you will be achieving great things with those students. And it might be 10, 20 years down the line that you bump into one of your old students that says to you, you know what, in that PE lesson or in that session, you really taught me, or you really lit my desire to go on and achieve great things. So I think teaching PE is a really, really worthwhile vocational part of a great thing to be able to do, and never underestimate the role that you play, and particularly female PE teachers, and what a role model you are to inspiring the next generation of students coming along the system. So hats off to you all for doing a great job. I hope you found that session today interesting, and keep up the great work.
Wow, that's great. Your last word has been so inspirational. I mean, I think all our teachers they have been charged. I think now we are fully 100% charged. I know you're able to bring your power. I think there's so much of power. There's some secret in you that you're able to instill the power within us. That's great, because you're sitting somewhere else, but then you have a magic to bring it out. That's great. Thank you so much. Indeed, it was wonderful.
You might just want to translate that last bit about the importance.
For the last part, I'd say, yeah. मैम ये बता रही थी कि मैडम आप बता रही है जो पी टीचर्स है, जो भी हमारे टीचर्स है, बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे, कभी आपने आपको कम नहीं समझना है, क्योंकि ये जो भारत का जो भविष्य आपके हमारे हाथ में है और आप बहुत अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं। लेकिन आपको अभी जो भी है उसका जो रिजल्ट है वो अभी जरूरी नहीं मिलना, आपको शायद 10 साल या 12 साल में या 15 साल में मिल जाए। लेकिन आपको जरूर एक वक्त आएगा जब बच्चे आपसे आके बोलेंगे कि देखिए
Are you still there, Dr. Usher, or have you just disappeared?
Yeah, I can hear her either.
I can't either.
I think Dr. Usher's just disappeared, but hopefully the rest of you can hear me. Thank you very much for participating and joining in. And I'll just reiterate the great work that you do with all your students. Keep it up and keep smiling and keep inspiring. And hopefully Dr. Usher can join us back on the line.
Yeah, I hope so. But before I, there is again, Dr. Usher.
I think you're still on mute, Dr. Usher, you're on mute.
I'll just repeat once again.
You've gone back on mute. That's it.
Now can you hear?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much. So मैम जो बता रही थी कि आप लोग बहुत अच्छा कर रही हैं और हमें कभी भी अपने आप को कम नहीं समझना है, क्योंकि भारत का जो भविष्य है आपके हाथ में है। और मैंने बोला कि आप हम लकी है कि ये जो प्रोफेशन हमने चुना है बहुत अच्छा है। आपके पास जरूर बच्चे आके कहेंगे कि आपकी वजह से मैं इस स्तर पे पहुंचा है। तो जो स्टूडेंट एंगेजमेंट का टॉपिक मैंने बताया वो बोल रहे हैं सबसे ज्यादा लागू फिजिकल एजुकेशन टीचर्स पे ही है। तो आपका बहुत अच्छा तरह से बोला, मैम ने हैट्स ऑफ भी किया है। दैट मीन्स आप समझ सकती हैं कि आप लोगों का इतना अच्छा रोल है। एंड हम लोग बहुत लकी है कि सारे जो विमेन पी टीचर्स इतना अच्छा काम कर पाए। So Dr. Ruth, I think you can see the chat box. They are happy because I felt this. I felt charged. So I'm sure we had almost 7,000, 8,000 teachers who are charged. So how much of power? I don't know from where we could actually charge it. That makes a difference, don't you think so? Because we usually have a mobile, but I don't know how cute that. That was great. Thank you so much for charging us and bringing in us. Because even in spite of having a 1.5 hours time, I know it's been tiring for you, but then the entire energy poured across. So I think you can charge 8,000. That's a big number. That's great. Thank you. And thanks. I can see Rosa, Dr. Rosa, such a busy person is around here. Nice. Hi, Rosa. I'll just take up 1 or 2 questions because we'll just take 1 or 2 questions because there are a lot of questions which came in. There were a few questions which were brought in. And since I was playing this, there was a problem was
Dr. Usha, may I speak? I must leave, but I really want to say thank you.
If you can take up 1 or 2, then we could take it alternate. You could take it, Claudia, please. One, then I'll take up the next question.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ruth, because you have taught me now that teachers must leave tattoos, like tattoos of the scars of learning in the students. The world has changed, but not the education. The education maybe is similar and something is boring, and it is paradoxical because learning is changing and we need to change the way to involve students' learning through building their own knowledge. We must find a way to surprise the student, because surprise them, they get compromised in their own learning, because when they have curiosity, they have desire and motivation to learn. So thank you very much. I must leave right now, but congratulations for your presentation.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you very much, and bye to everyone.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Now there are certain questions. Now one is Seema Kumari. many changes come in adolescent age. By the time they are adolescents, how can we handle such students?
What was that? Many changes come
Students
through.
now they are into the teens, adolescent. There are a lot of, when they reach the adolescent age, then they have certain problems. So how do we go about with the student engagement in this particular age group?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to what I said, regardless if you're teaching younger children right through to university, right through to mature students. I think the skill of the great teachers is finding out your students and finding out and treating them as individuals. I know that's really difficult if you're teaching a large class size. I know it's really hard to do, but the best teachers to me are the ones that know the students and know what their issues might be, their concerns, the aspects that may find it challenging for them to engage. But the really good teachers know that. And remember, my session mentioned it's not just about the academic teachers. It's about using all the other support services are there. So whether you've got health and well-being, whether you've got careers, library, whoever, counsellors, whoever you've got in your institution, it's using that network as well to help inform you about your students. So it's looking at that different aspects, but the best teachers are the ones that know the students, and it's the good teachers that take the time to find out about the students.
Thank you. There's another question. There were a number of them asking a question. What is blanket approach?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, a blanket approach just means a broad, generic approach. So it's just saying that we'll take one approach and this approach fits all. That's what I mean by blanket. Yeah, I should be better at that. I should know not to use words like that where I should be better than that.
I'll just explain that in the blanket approach का मतलब ये था कि जैसे हम कुछ पढ़ाते हैं तो सबको हम एक जैसे जब समझते हैं, जैसे कक्षा में सब बच्चे अलग अलग उनकी जरूरत होती है, लेकिन जब टीचर क्या करता है, वो टीचर पढ़ाते तो हमें लगता है कि सारे बच्चे समझ पाते हैं, तो हम सबको एक ग्रुप जैसे समझते हैं, उसी को एक ब्लैंकेट अप्रोच बताया गया है. There's another question by Manisha. There are some students who have a fear of getting an injury while playing outdoor games. So they prefer staying away from playing games. How to get such children involved in sports activities?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And not every student likes sport. Not every student likes different things. But it's about, to me, Rosa knows my background. To me, education is not all, it's about making it fun. And if you make it fun, and if you don't make it extremely competitive, and if you don't make it where everybody has to be the best or achieve the best, you can get people. My family, I'm one of 3 girls, and none of them like sport. None of them. I'm unusual in my family because nobody likes sport in my family. But I can get my 2 older sisters to participate in sport through making it fun and making it silly and making it daft. So it's taking away some of the aspects of not making everything serious or not making everybody has to be the best. It's making education or making sport or making students attend extra maths classes or whatever you're involved in, it's making it fun. So anybody can participate. That's my advice. Not always achieved, but that's my advice.
Thank you. Another question by Gokarna is, since the number of children are more in the class, so at times it's very difficult to pay attention to each student, and it becomes difficult. At times it is very difficult, and we are unable to satisfy. In such cases, how to deal with it, especially children, because they're different, and their sentence, it becomes very difficult to handle this. So could you suggest? What about your suggestions in this?
It is really hard, and it's hard to teach a class of 300, and you've got a big. I mean, if I give you my example, you've got a big lecture theatre. You're not going to know those 300 students in the lecture theatre, but some little tips. So one thing I do when I go into a big lecture theatre is I get every student to get a piece of paper and stick it, and they've got the name on, so I can walk up and down the lecture theatre and I can say, Dr. Usher, what do you think? Or Rosa, what do you think? So simple things like knowing a student's name can break down some of those barriers. So simple techniques, or if you've got a 1-hour lecture and you've got 300 in the class, giving them 2 minutes to talk to stop everything, to talk to their neighbour, talk to their friend, and then come back and let them shout out the answers to some of your. So large class sizes are really difficult, but there's simple little tips that you can help engage. So you can engage a class of 200, 300, and you can make it interesting for students, and also allowing students to answer wrongly, and they don't feel intimidated if they give a wrong answer. So starting off the session by saying, get involved. Nobody's going to, you know, if you give there's no right or wrong answers here. I just want to hear what you say. So it's breaking down those barriers that they don't feel inhibited by shouting out or giving a wrong answer. So there's lots of little tips where you can break those barriers down.
There's one question by Desh Deepa. I'm slightly changing question. Most of the, especially when you talk of girls, they won't come out. When you talk of engagement, they are into academics. Their main focus is only to get into the academics because it's into getting a job. So the system prevailing in our country is very different. Maybe the parents, everybody needs it. So it's very difficult to bring them out of that. So how is it possible for them? I don't say sport, but any activity, what could be done? What could be done so that we could motivate them and get them a break from the academics, to make them realize that this student engagement is going to help you to reach further.
Yeah, and you make a really important point, and this is where the plea goes to the senior leaders in the organisations to recognise that girls and females may have different barriers to the males or the boys in the organisation because of stereotypical views. And it comes down to the thing that I touched on in the lecture about intercultural skills and recognising that people from different parts of the world have different values, different beliefs, different systems, etc. And it's recognising that, and it's respecting that, but it's also helping to work with, whether it's parents, whether it's families, whether it's the individual students, whether it's the institutions, whether it's the senior manager, to say, we recognise the values, we understand them, etc. But we've got these perceived barriers and we need to help break down those barriers. And all the female PE teachers and coaches on the thing are doing that daily, because they're seen as role models to the girls, to say that they've achieved that, they've done that, etc. So role models and inspiring and spreading the message is really important, and that needs to be done right up at the government level, right through policy, right through the senior members of an institution, and most importantly, the female PE teachers who are demonstrating that on a daily basis can help overcome some of those barriers.
This is one question I can take up right now. Kamna Mohan, she said physical education, even though the teacher does the best trying to involve maximum students, but the appreciation that they hardly get any appreciation. In the other case, it's accountable. You can see a person scoring good in mathematics, but here when it comes to, so this ends in some teachers getting into depression, and they are not, because out of putting the entire service, they are unable to get from the higher authorities.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this in previous talks, haven't I, Dr. Usher, where I understand that in some countries, in some people's views, that maths and English and science and engineering and being a doctor or being a lawyer is far, far more important in some people's views than being involved in sport and playing sport, etc. But what lots of people fail to see is that sport can offer so many values, so many skills, so many different sets of learning and understanding that maths can't, that English can't. So if you think about playing sport can help teamship, can help leadership, can help communication, can help empathy, can help all those different types of skills, as well as learning about sport, whether it's biomechanics, whether it's sports management, whether it's nutrition or whatever. So I think sport, and this is where the message needs to be sold again, is that sport can offer so much to lots of people, to society, to individuals, to the health, for the wellness, for the mental well-being. And the message needs to be from the top, infiltrated down. And the stuff that you're doing, Dr. Usher, with all these panels that you're putting on in the Ministry of Sport and Sports Authority India, and the big thing that you did on International Women's Day, that message is sending out that sport has got an important part to play in every society, in every country, to everybody, girl, boy, and the message needs to be infiltrated. And I've worked in higher education for 25 years, and as I said at the beginning, I've been to lots of different countries. And what's great to see is that that attitude is changing. So I used to go to countries years ago where often you're selling sport to the parents, and those parents want your child to be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. But that shift is started to change. So I go to countries now and they're saying, yeah, how can my son or how can my daughter get involved in sport? So the message is starting, and we just need to keep spreading the message, and all the PE teachers are doing that daily.
Thanks. And it's been a marathon session. You need to have some energy booster too, some doses. Dr. Rosa, I know it's been such a hectic session. I saw you for this Congress, you're there, and I think day and night you are either in China, you're in different parts of the country taking in sessions. Ma'am, for your remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Usha and Dr. Ruth. It's a pleasure always to listen to your voice, to your presentation. And as Dr. Usha indicated, the message you provide us is so relevant to the teaching profession. So I think this is one of the aspects that I appreciate the most, the passion you speak with. And of course, with that passion, you make us feel energetic and make us feel, okay, this is the way to go. I'm not crazy one, I'm not wrong. I mean, it's someone else in other place of the world thinks like the way that I do, so fantastic. I mean, this is what makes us feel energetic. And that's, I think that's the intention of Dr. Usha, because I got it. I have a very busy day today, but I said, I will listen to Ruth because I know, I mean, she inspired, and that's really nice. One of the elements when you mention and the whole concept is like how we embrace everybody. I think that's important, how we embrace as students. And there's one important element that sometimes we have to remind all those who in an organization, and I'm speaking from a sport management view, it's like in an organization, don't ever forget that in a university, we are there because there are students. And if we don't treat the students in the same way we would like us to be treated, then there's something wrong, okay? So this is one reminder that we always should have there, like treat others as you would like yourself to be treated. And that the reason for that to be there is because there are students. It's the same thing with any staff organizations or in which there are athletes and coaches. And believe it or not, I have been in places in which there are some staff that indicate, I don't like when coaches come in because they don't smell well, or the girls or the athletes. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, what are we here for? This is the reason why we are here. So we need to embrace all. So thank you very much for your powerful message, but also for providing an example for research and theory. So I appreciate it very much, and keep on going with your message all over. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Usha.
Rosa.
Thank you, Dr. Shiki.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosa, for being a part of this. I know instead of being busy, you made your presence. Dr. Beatrice, are you there, please? Dr. Beatrice? I think Beatrice is joined. Dr. Kishore, sir, for your remarks, please.
So, I would like to appreciate and congratulate Dr. Ruth for his excellent presentation. This has got a lot of relevance in the Indian context, especially when we have to formulate and design some strategies to enable the engagement of students, the engagement of each and every student, and so that we have to overcome the barriers and to be successful. And that way, in fact, while going through the profile of Dr. Ruth, we could see that MANM is one of the think tanks, including in various forums, universal forums like Doha Goals, whether there is in which universally recognized authority for world leaders to create initiatives for global progress through sports, and as well as 5th World Parks Congress in South Africa was exclusively by nomination and invitation under the patronage of Nelson Mandela. So these are all outstanding achievement. We have heard from a very, very important person and very learned and experienced person, and man has also been frequently asked by comment by sports management education for the media, sit on scientific. So this also is very important, the management of media, how to comment on sports management education for the media. Mostly we know the entire public revolve around the information given through the media. So the what the media gives, how far it is based on facts, how far it is based on science, how far it is based on principles, or has to be somebody has to cross check. So this is very important. And we would also like to mention, I think whether Dr. Usha has mentioned it, that Dr. Ruth also is the recipient of Distinguished Service Awards from the European Association of Sports Management. So this is very important. The prize has been awarded to only one individual, no other, in recognition of her significant involvement and outstanding service, her commitment for leadership, style, as well as her collegiality and loyalty to the higher standards. So what I would like to just, make a remark from Dr. Ruth is that after having gone through 2-3 sessions from India and having this much of experience with a vast youth population for the country, would you like to make any special remarks on our the approach required or the strategic solutions to engage the Indian youth into the sports in accordance to the latest systems, latest practices in the world? So would you like to make a mention about this? What do you feel like most important for our country?
Thanks, Dr. Kishore. Thanks for that. And you've touched on some things there which are important, but also Rosa mentioned things about embracing all. And my philosophy, and I've been privileged and had the opportunity to meet people and meet high profile people, but my philosophy in sport and in what I do is always that everybody is equal, everybody is the same, regardless of title or status. And my simple philosophy is it's nice to be kind, and you get so much more from people if you have that simple philosophy. And what I've recognized, and I told you that I've worked in India a lot, and I've worked with people from India, and we have many students that have come over from India, is do not underestimate the culture of India and how lovely the Indian people are and how much knowledge and experience. But the values and the culture of India is special. And you've got so much to give to the world that we can learn from. So I mentioned at the beginning, I'm working with a student now, an Indian student who's looking at martial arts and what stops females from participating in India. But what I would say is about what you're doing and this whole initiative that Dr. Usha and the team and the Sports Authority and the Ministry are running is another perfect example of how you are utilising and selling the message of sport and the importance of sport, and how you're embracing all those different institutions and you're working with people. And that's just another perfect example of a brilliant initiative that's come out of India that's given me something to really think about working on the World Sports Board, and Rosa's aware of it. And I've learned a lot from what you're running here, and we're going to hopefully develop some similar ideas and initiatives on the World Sports Board. So it's not always about external people teaching you what you should do. I often think, how can I learn from what you do? And you've taught me a great deal working in India over the years, but being involved in this partnership, it's fantastic. And the Indian people have an awful lot to give in sport across the world, and we can learn from you too. So it's a two-way process, and that's the best teachers, and that's the best education. You learn best practice from people that demonstrate that, and that's always been my simple philosophy: learn from the best. And we've done that in this. So keep up the great work.
So thank you, Dr. Ruth. I think Dr. Ruth has appreciated the Indians, the culture and tradition of having appreciation to the teachers and coaches. and the Indian practices, just because we had the pioneers in education too during the ancient civilization, when we had the universities, maybe Nalanda, Takshashila, and old, starting from the old systems prevailing. So we have to have bits and pieces from the system, at the same time the best practices worldwide, but at the same time we should imbibe the culture and tradition of ours too. That is what I think in nutshell Dr. Ruth has sent. And I think, thank you so much, Dr. Ruth, for the wonderful presentation and excellent session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kishore sir. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Ruth, for giving this. I think if you look at the chat box, you can see the amount of appreciation, and they all are highly impressed. They all are charged today. So I'm happy they're all going to leave being charged. So this charge should remain for some time. So anyway, your video is recorded. So that's instilled in us so much. So thank you so much. We come to the end of the session. Before we have the feedback also we put in, but I'll also put in the, I need to thank, come to the end of Dr. Ruth, hats off to you. First hats off to you. We all, 8,000 hats. That's great. So thank you so much. On behalf of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Ministry of Women and Child Development, lecture by National College of Physical Education, and all those present here, a big thank you. So that says a hats off to a great teacher, because you are the best person who engaged, who taught us what engagement is, and you brought in engagement within us. So I think there was a great engagement. You took us through the journey, but it was not only the theory, but that's why I said, I think you had a magic where you could put that, instill in us engagement too. And for the information of all, since you took a session, I started implementing that in my class, trying to bring about whatever you mentioned, trying to implement it with the students. And it does work, because even if one student changes, I find that's important. It need not be the entire lot. But that's a great lesson which you have taught. And I think, so I think all the teachers are doing the PE teachers are doing a wonderful job, because they bring in children who go in the wrong path. Our PE teachers are the ones who channelize them and brings them to a career and shows them the light. Is the PE teachers who do it. So hats off to all the PE teachers, because it's a great job our PE teachers are doing. But even though they're not seen, they're behind the screen, but they are doing a great job. And that's what I think we need to have a hats off to all our teachers. So once again, a big thank you to our speaker, because I think there'll be great demand for you. If there are others who listen to you, say, come on, we need another session from you again to hear what Dr. Ruth says. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to thank Professor Rosa, because I know she's been so busy throughout with another conference. But then I was pleading, darling, Rosa, please join us for the sessions. I know I've been pestering you, troubling you so much. But then you are there. It's Pascaway who's there, and the president of Pascaway. So thank you so much, madam, for being with us and strengthening and making truly international. You are the one who introduced us to Dr. Ruth. So that's why I said it's you who brought in such leaders. And you have shown. Now, most of us may not get an opportunity to go outside, but then this is one way by which all our teachers from across the country are able to hear such international speakers of high repute. So thank you so much, Rosa ma'am. Thank you so much. I also would like to say Dr. Ruth madam is also the vice president of WASM. That's why the sports management speaks in you. We say an encyclopedia of sport management. I'd like to thank Dr. Beatrice. Ma'am, thank you so much for being a part of us. I think there's some problem. I really need to thank you. I need to thank Dr. Claudia, because I believe she's there at sharp 5 a.m. in the morning and makes it a point of being with us and strengthening our program. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Dr. Kishore sir, who's very supportive and has got a vision and wants to start anything new and want to raise LNCP to get into a better standard and show it as a model for the country. Thank you so much, Dr. Kishore sir. I'd like to thank Mr. Sanjeev Patil, who's a co-host. I'd like to thank Pranish and Harihar. And we have another Abhijit with us. Abhijit, thank you so much for the technical support. I'd like to thank all my dear teachers, all my dear girls, I'd say, because I know it's been a long time, morning to us, evening to us. You need to attend your sessions. So thank you so much, because I know by the end of 2 weeks, you all have become young girls, bubbling with full of energy, and you are the heart and soul of this program. So thank you so much. In the end, I need to thank one and all. And I think, Dr. Ruth, by now we have almost 2,700 teachers who have already voted. Can you see it on the screen? Can you see the blue lines on the screen?
No. No.
Okay, anyway, we find this. So we'll share this feedback also with you, because the number matters. We'll share the feedback form also with you, and the link also will be sharing. So this time we have a big number, nearly when we have 3,000 teachers who have responded, we are reaching 3,000. So I think it's been so once again, thank you so much. It's been a great one.
You're welcome,
And it's a
Dr.
memorable one too. Thank
And
you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for the opportunity, and thank you to all the people that listened in today, and keep up the great work. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rosa.
Bye.
Thank you, Rosa. Bye-bye.